That's yeah.
That's big.
Just 2 times.
How's it going, Jay?
Good,
How you doing, man?
Yeah. 7 games.
Hey, Caitlin, let me show you.
Yeah.
So any more trips to the Midwest, John? Are you home for the summer?
Yeah.
But you just got back.
What did he get?
I talked to you oh, again? I talked to you last month. You were on your way back.
I was up in British Columbia.
Oh,
Looking at the Jasper fire.
get around.
And then I was down in LA
I heard that,
looking at the
you know,
Passaic fire.
Oh, was the BC one, the one that impacted us a few days ago? Like,
No, this is last year's fire in Jasper.
Okay. Okay.
80,000 acres.
Not by
Wow.
just people on their property.
Passaic fire outside of LA, right on the edge.
And then he walks.
Uh,
You could also picture.
There was a small fire near our cabin.
They were valuable
Go
too.
back and look at it, so
But it spared your cabin?
this time.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people-
Did he find the wood thrush yet?
I think they want to trees that cut down.
So that was.
No, instead of having to like,
All right.
there was no calls.
The benefit of all of the smoke in the air was that it created one of my best-selling pictures of all time.
Oh, I mean, the colors are unrivaled, right?
It's what's left of Jasper, the town. Burnt out this whole.
And where was
thing.
that? British
This is-
Columbia?
This is on the, up in Alberta, just north of
Yeah.
Lake Louise.
I know,
So it burned. You can-
Were they drafting from that river or did they have enough water pressure?
It's just, it's just a,
I think it's.
I don't know what to say. This is,
They were.
I mean, you can see it burned all like this and then down and then followed the river towards the glaciers.
Was that taken from a
I was
drone?
up in a tram,
Wow.
We had.
80-some thousand acres.
8,000.
Fire assessment or assessment review. Just-
No,
Yeah,
I lived up there for a long time, district law.
I see.
Still have a cabin up there.
Really? I have a little yellow.
So it's like, it's my home.
I think I have
Yeah,
to spade.
yeah.
Spade.
Yeah, I mean, a sawmill is not.
I think so.
I guess the strategy up in with these Canadian fires, there's just no way to deal with it. You just don't burn out. Because do they, I mean, is there any firefighting that, I mean, obviously when you're in town,
The catcher.
Our attitude is
Yeah.
you start from the town, taking back to the fire.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
In some of these remote areas where there's just nothing, not much you
Yeah,
can
I think
do.
when they showed.
Yeah, if it's remote, they'll let it go.
Yeah.
But.
And then there was like.
Jasper is one of the prime
A whole bunch of stuff in.
World Heritage sites and a famous ski town.
Yeah, but if you're operating locally.
Pretty,
Okay. It came through.
it's just,
Also, the thrasher came through.
Road thresher.
Yeah.
part of it is the speed at which those fires move now.
My friend.
And you think it's like. They really care.
How's it going, Jeremy? It's agenda right there if you like, right behind you if you like an agenda.
Haven't heard it since.
I don't think they haven't. They haven't got this.
Something keeps on going over like the swallows in your bag. And then I went
now
down.
they're, now they're just can't.
And there's like different kind of swallows. Do the same.
Well, there's that tree, and I,
Right.
Not far enough.
No, they're not.
long to, yeah, but people have been saying bank a lot.
I think it's bang. Then there's, I think it's a chimney.
And then there's all kinds of, like a juvenile, all bets are off, just they look.
All right, thanks everyone for being punctual.
Is the wayside?
Make sure I got this audio working. Yeah. Here's some more spots. You'll be closer to the screen to see. That's better. All right, good. We can hear someone. Hopefully you can hear us. Give me a thumbs up. All right, good.
Yeah, it looks like the weather will be better. Go to
All right. All right, we're back for our monthly Correllus conversation. Welcome, everyone. We have Karen Lombard from the Nature Conservancy. Well, you're going to see people if their videos are on. That's why I'm kind of just making the quick announcement. So, in addition to a handful of people from the public, we've also got our DC partners from the Northern Outpost, Paul Gregory, AJ Torini. We have Peter Church, and we also have Matt Pelican from Biodiversity Works, Elise Wahlberg from DCR. And all right, let's get started. Good to have everyone back. And we got a full agenda, but I think we can get through a number of these fairly quickly. All right, I guess first is a cutting plan has been filed for the White Pine Plantation Removal and Restoration Project. AJ or Paul, you want to fill us in?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Just in follow-up to our last meeting. So last week, DCR sent out notifications to the delegation, the town, the task force, the Abutters Association, the Conservation Commission for Edgartown, as well as the tribe to make them aware that DCR filed the cutting plan with the State Service Forester. And what I'll do is Paul has that cutting plan. I'll turn it over to Paul. He can pull it up on his screen, kind of walk through the form, and then also the map of the cutting plan and the two focused areas. Paul?
Paul, you should have the ability to post that if you'd like.
Okay, let me see here.
Oh, I missed you, Tom. Good to see you.
Let me see. Oh, there we go. I couldn't find the share button. How's that?
We can see the fine print. Well, we can see there's fine print.
How's that?
Good. It's not getting much bigger, but we've got people leaning in on this. We got screens on both sides of the room, so I think we'll be okay. There we go. That's better.
And that's the
Thanks.
biggest I can go right there.
That's good.
Right, so as AJ mentioned, I filed the fourth cutting plan last Friday. It's filed electronically with the DCR Service Forestry through their online program, and I did a certified mail to the Bold Meadow Property Owners Association, as long as and a copy was sent as a courtesy to the Edgartown Select Board. So the forest cutting plan, first section just starts off with some basic information on where it's located, how many acres, start date, the volume of the forest products to be harvested, who the landowner is, and who prepared the plan. And the next section is the best management practices. You will notice these are all blank as the project does not involve any stream or wetland crossing, filter strips, or harvesting in wetlands. Right. So the next section is the volume of the forest products to be harvested and individual stand information. In our case, we have 2 stands as we've presented in the past meetings. There's the landowner's signature. In this case is Tom Brule, as he's the DCR state lands manager. And then we have the service forester section who will either approve or disapprove the plan, sign the plan, give an expiration date, which is typically forest cutting plans are valid for 2 years, but you are able to get extensions if you can prove that you need it.
So without looking at all the photos.
The next section is the narrative page where one provides information if other was used in any of the coding in the previous sections. So in our case, the only section we used other was in the was up here in the stand type of cut stand treatment. So we just have to put what's our source of regeneration for that stand and the desired future condition. And I'll just go through it. That all white pine, Scots pine will be removed, retaining tree oak and pitch pine. The objective is to restore native sandplant heathlands and pitch pine oak scrub oak parents habitats through the overstore removal of existing conifer plantations and subsequent application of prescribed fire. Restoring these fire-dependent natural communities will provide habitat for a diversity of rare species. And the desired future condition is a sparse woodland dominated by tree oak and highly scattered pitch pine with an understory of scrub oak, low bush blueberry, and black huckleberry with regeneration of oak and pitch pine trees. And we can go to the map, and that's basically it. I mean, the other sections, if you had more string crossings, more BMPs that you had to fill out. But then for the map, here's the map that goes along with the forest cutting plan. You can see in the southeast corner, we buffered the trails 50 feet so as not to be directly on the trails. And area 2 is buffered as well, I think at least 75 from the trails and roads. And each of those 4 blue hatch boxes are polygons are those 3 acres in size. So there's 4 3-acre patch cuts in the stand 2, as we're calling it on the forest cutting plan. I guess now we can have any questions or comments on the procedure.
Great. From our working group counterparts, do you have any questions about what's been presented?
Can you remind me about the patch cuts in the northern one? I just don't remember that from before.
Sure, those are 3. There are 4 of them, as we can see from the map. They're 3 acres in size, and within those polygons, all white pine will be removed, retaining any oak, which is few and far between. So it's basically just removing the white pine in those patches to see how these things regenerate, and if things go well, we would remove at some point in the future the remaining area within that black box that surrounds all 4 of those patch cuts.
Okay.
And Paul, maybe I just didn't hear it. You mentioned something about the buffers. Did you say that's 30 feet on the path and 50 feet from?
It's 50 feet on stand one, which is the southeast, stand one, which is, the Pine Trail, Log Jam, and Red Trail. Those will all have 50 feet. The paved bike path will have a 30 feet buffer. And the stand two, which has the 4 3-acre patch cuts, it's at least 75 feet from any road or trail on those.
Oh, I see. Thank you for clarifying. Okay. All right, and you said 52 acres, I think, total for this phase one.
Right. Removing the buffers, having the buffers in place reduces the 47-acre plantation down to 40, excuse me. And then the 12 acres is the 4 3-acre patch cuts. So you get a total of 52.
All right, very good. Tom, Matt, Adam, anything you wanted to ask? Well, I can see that it has, evolved from what we first discussed, as we've been having these conversations over the past several months. So, wanted to thank you for taking some of those concerns into account. And it's exciting. We have a start date now as well. And we'll get to a little bit more of, what the harvest might involve later on in the agenda. But thank you, forestry team, on that. I'm also excited about kind of long-awaited meeting with Department of Transportation as well as DCR's Trails, and Greenways team, that I just wanted to update folks on. We've had numerous meetings with the airport, DCR, DOT, the designers, that have been enlisted by DCR. And to be really candid, it feel like we're learning about a new hurdle from DOT at every turn. But I feel like we finally kind of cracked the Iron Curtain. They have now a scoping session scheduled for a week from today for the shared use path repaving project. There's no short of 36 people from their agency who, are, invited to participate in that. So that feels like kind of an official gateway moment of sorts. I'm being optimistic here, but I feel like we've worked hard to get to this point. And, I'm glad people have stayed involved along the way, to get us here and now to really get traction on this project. Just as a reminder, it's just shy of probably 8 miles of repaving, but it's somewhat tricky because of some of it runs through the airport through an easement, some of it's squarely inside of the Correllus state, the Correllus property bounds. And then some of it's outside of an easement inside the airport. So, that's been a priority of ours, and next time we meet, hopefully there'll be something, even more substantive to report. Nonetheless, I don't want to discount the importance of this upcoming meeting next Tuesday. Any questions on that before we keep ourselves moving along?
I just want, what we're trying to do with that, because the right of way seems to be a big problem, is trying to segment it and trying to get some movement, places that don't have any right of way issues, and trying to get those done, and leaving the more difficult, complicated sections to be more discussed. Is that sort of accurate?
Right. If we can phase it to get something done sooner, let's do it.
That's like our strategy, because there are some pieces we don't think are very controversial, and there are some pieces that are maybe not controversial, but definitely require us to put our heads together in terms of right of way, in terms of other things that requirements that we have to have. So we're trying to break it up a little bit and try to get some movement. Again, thanks to DCR, you've been a part of that. You're right away people. I don't see Gerard on it, but thank him.
Megan, I do see your hand. We'll get to public comments at the end. I'm not just superstitious, but I'm also kind of a big fan of tradition. So No, I won't forget you. AJ, how about I turn it over to you on the home site residence item? Any updates there, or
Sure. Thanks,
we
Dan.
still working through the legislative? Go ahead.
Yeah, so we're expecting some news from the state, from the administration in the next week or two on the bond bill and its release. So that's an avenue DCR is looking towards. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we did speak to Rep. Moakley, who's filed legislation, and spoke to the chair of the committee that bill is held in, to let them know that DCR is actively working with the task force to come to a resolution on housing at the in the former superintendent's house in the state forest. So I'm hoping with that bond bill release that we'll be able to use that as the next vehicle and next step, and then coordinate with the delegation. So coming weeks. I know everyone's been very patient with this.
All right. Fantastic. Oh, and we added something this month that, we began to talk about a little bit at the last meeting. But I appreciate, the work that's gone into, trying to track down the appropriate staff, give us a better sense of, I think the question last month was, how would the white pine removal and restoration work, would it have an impact on our water quality here on the island? And I know you've done some work to get a response to that, and thought this would be a good chance, if you wanted to share what you learned on that item.
Sure. What I'll do is, Dan, I'm going to read what I sent to the task force last week, if that's okay, regarding that. And there was a question there about erosion as well. So as a reference point, DCR's Division of Water Supply and Protection, in partnership with the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, supplies unfiltered drinking water to 53 communities servicing about 3.1 million residents and 5,000 industrial users within the greater Boston area. And forests play a critical role as natural biofilters. They slow and absorb stormwater and filter out sediments and pollutants that would otherwise enter our waterways and our reservoirs. Our water supply protection team's core mission is to maintain healthy forest cover across the watershed lands it owns and manages, and to ensure that long-term forest health and resilience in the face of climate uncertainty. Division of Water Supply Protection actively manages its forests to promote biodiversity. And over the past 50 years, more than 1,000 timber harvests have taken place within the Division of Water Supply Protection land, and with monitoring showing that no decline in water quality as a result. And as a reminder, the goal of this project here is to remove non-native conifer plantations and restore the area to high-quality native barren oak woodland communities. And the restoration will increase the forest resilience to future climate impacts by introducing a more diverse mix of native trees and understory plants, species that are currently missing due to the past planting practices. Enhancing biodiversity is essential to improving both the resilience and adaptive capacity of the ecosystem under changing climate conditions. And then in terms of erosion, the soils within the plantation removal area are primarily sandy and not highly erodible. And additionally, the project area has minimal slopes. Usually erosion typically becomes a greater concern when two conditions are present, where you have highly erodible soils such as silts, and then steep and extended slopes. Within this project area, those conditions don't necessarily exist. So the risk of soil erosion is considered low to our forestry team.
All right. Thanks for tracking that down. That was a good question, and I hope that's some reassurance. We're also looking ahead, to the actual, operations on the ground for, I think it said December 1st, Paul. And continue to kind of build out our list of, potential parties that could be interested in some of the white pine that could be actually, of value, and put to good use. I would imagine locally, not exclusively, but Paul and Tom have been in conversation with to talk about how to best kind of engage that, re-engage that conversation as we get closer to the actual work taking place. And Paul suggested that, meeting on site will probably be, a good format. Probably be more revealing things that we can see and talk about on the fly. So we've announced that to the running list that we have to take place on June 23rd at 10 a.m. I'm just gonna pull up right here where we'd like to meet. Give me one moment. So that's 2 weeks from yesterday, I believe. That's a Monday. Yeah, that's a Monday morning. This is where that doesn't help. This is where we also met for the pre-harvest walk that took place this past November. So there is a parking area right at the intersection of, 5 Road 12, just as you're kind of exiting the state forest or, going east towards Edgartown, it's off on your left. And we're looking forward to that. I think we'll learn, some of the questions that I've been sending out. I'm getting some responses to. I think different levels of concern associated with blue stain and storing things for too long. So, all along we've been asking, we've been saying this, the smaller the acreage, the better chance we can actually put some of this, smaller the acreage for phase one, better chance we can put some of the timber to use. Because we don't have a huge storage facility, we don't have that centralized warehouse where we could put acres and acres worth. So, coming down from 79 to 52 acres, I think that's, in that direction that, helps us to achieve some of that. So, thank you on that front. And I'm hoping for a good turnout that day. If there are different, sort of avenues or platforms that people can think of to, amplify that meeting, beyond the informal list that I have, please let me know. Because we'd like to make the most of that. Any questions about that site visit? I did have one more announcement, but any questions about that site visit?
Why don't you say the date and time again?
Oh, yeah. All right. So that's Monday the 23rd, 10 a.m. But more, happening even sooner than that is this could be of interest to some people because I think there's some similarity in the landscape where there was some restoration work done in East Falmouth at a wildlife management area called Francis Crane, I believe. I visited that place myself, and that was really interesting to see how things have reestablished the sort of ecology, that we're talking about. I think there's a lot of similarities with the desired outcomes that were, mentioned earlier by Paul. And I think it's Division of Fish and Wildlife is leading a tour there. I think it's Saturday the 14th, if I'm doing my math right, or is that Sunday? Today's Tuesday, right? Tuesday, right? Saturday the 14th. I'm still waiting to get confirmation on what time that'll be. But that's not, it's maybe a 15-20 minute drive from Woods Hole. I think it's along the bike path as well. So just wanted to you know, as there's definitely been there's a number of questions about, you know, we expect short term, midterm, but then also, you know, as more time passes in these zones of the state forest. Anything else? Anything you heard me, Tom, Matt? Karen, want to mention before we keep moving it along down the track here? All right. With that, why don't I turn to Megan first? I saw your hand earlier.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Hi, everybody. Okay, I have to go back to where I wrote down my questions. Hang on a second, please. Well, one question is, what is the actual date that you mentioned? We're going to find out the date of the start of the actual work. Did I mishear you?
Well, natural
Sorry,
heritage.
go ahead, Paul.
Let's say Natural Heritage will review the forest cutting plan and will give us a time frame on when operations can take place. It'll be a window. Typically it's December through April. But we can't do anything until we get that we get a letter from Natural Heritage detailing their criteria that we have to stick to. And so the December date on the forest cutting plan was a best guess on when the first possible date we could start.
I have a couple questions, if you don't mind, but thank you for that. Who is it with DCR, the forester who certifies the forest cutting plan? What is that person's title and, if possible, name?
The person is a DCR service forester. He's in the service forestry division, and his name is Jim Rassman. He covers
and
the
that happens
Southeast.
before. Excuse me. Does that happen before Heritage?
No, Jim will send the forest cutting plan to Natural Heritage. They will send him back a letter which he includes with his certification of the forest cutting plan.
Okay, and that time frame is usually a couple of months, but because of the seasonality with regard to
Jim Rassman has 10 days to respond, 10 days to approve it, and once he sends it to Natural Heritage has 10 days to respond to Jim, and then totally Jim has 10 days to respond to approve or disapprove the plan.
So it's a short time frame.
It's a short time frame.
Okay.
But knowing that the Natural Heritage window won't start until later this year, obviously nothing will happen in the short term anyway. So it's.
Why is that? I think I know, but if you wouldn't mind sharing with all of us why that December to April period.
As I meant, that is typical of having the rare moth and butterflies that we've had in other parts of the state. They've given us windows that we can operate typically December through April. And that was my best guess on when things could possibly start. But again, we won't know until we get the official determination letter from Natural Heritage.
Which should be within about 20 days at this point.
Correct.
So then a question that maybe there isn't anyone here from DCR to answer, but knowing a little bit about frost bottoms and how many rare moths are associated with frost bottoms, is that something to bring into I won't say the conversation, but into the mix when you think about this particular landscape where the plantations would be removed and the seed bank and I don't know, whatever else DCR is going to do to get the rare species habitat going. But how many actual species are associated with this particular area, geological area, landscape area, whatever? Because I know enough about frost bottoms that they're in the low-lying areas based on the particular characteristics of frost bottoms, which is, foggy and lower and moisture and different temperature things going on, which is why these particular rare species do well. So that's a question. You don't have to answer today if you cannot, but I'd love to get an answer to that question, if you understand my question.
Right. I mean, there's no all the pine barrens, all the rare species associated with the pine barrens will benefit from the restoration plan. And just recently talking with the entomologist at DCR, it's really not that any are obligated in the frost bottoms. It's just that they can do better there, but they're not obligated to live there.
Right. Great. That's a very good explanation. Thank you. And
Matt,
the other question.
excuse me, Megan, 1 second. Matt might have had something to contribute
Okay.
to that. And I also, hold on 1 sec. I just want to thank you for also bringing up some new questions. Maybe just because I've been so immersed in this, I've been hearing many of the same questions. And I just wanted to kindly request that we try to bring up new ones this time around. That being said, I don't know if Matt, if you have something to add on that, and then Megan, I don't want to fully cut you off. I know you might have.
And I'll try to be precise with my other questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in general, the association of a moth is not with a geographical feature, but with a particular species of plant or a suite of plant species. So the reason that frost bottoms are known for their rare moths is because a lot of them are dominated by scrub oak, Quercus ilicifolia, and that species does very well in frost bottoms.
What was the second one?
The second what?
The common name for the
scrub oak.
No, you said scrub oak, and what was the other one?
The Latin name for it, Quercus ilicifolia.
Oh, okay,
I'm sorry, it's a spinal reflex in me at this point. Yeah, there was also a sort of phenology twist in some of the frost bottoms on the vineyard where the season is delayed, and so scrub oak is leafing out later in the frost bottoms than it is in some places. And there is some evidence, and I have this from Paul Goldstein, that there are some moths that have a phenology that has them flying later in the season than many other scrub oak moths would. And they tend to turn up in the frost bottoms because their phenology overlaps with the phenology of production of fresh leaves, digestible tender leaves, specifically in the frost bottoms. So you get them there rather than in frost bottoms on the plains, because those leaf out earlier, and by the time those particular moths are flying, the leaves have already gotten to be indigestibly tough and so forth. So I agree with Paul that the projected outcome for the restoration will vastly improve the affected area, the restoration area, from the perspective of state-listed moths. There is sort of the upper end of a frost bottom in that southeastern corner of the state forest, sort of continuing down into Pahogganut. I'm interested to see how that revegetates after the restoration.
Thank you very much. My last question. There was a reference to trails in the plan, I think Paul said. And the question I have, because I've sort of quickly read the conservation permit or the amended conservation and management permit from Heritage. And I'm getting the feeling that some of those illegal bike trails that Sheriff's Meadow cut are going to stay, and some are going to be restored, abandoned, etc. So when you refer to these setbacks to trails, these buffers, that means less, pine will be cut down, less vegetation, I guess. are any of these the illegal bike trails that Sheriff's Meadow cut in around 2021?
No, these have been around for a long time. These are very well-established trails within the forest.
Right. And was that a new, something new that you guys decided to do, or were you always intending to create the 50-foot and the 30-foot, and I guess eventually the 75-foot buffers?
Yeah, I can take that one for you, Paul.
Okay.
Megan, that's a good question. And through conversation, we had perfect. Are we pulling that up?
Trying to, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so we had some conversations with Dan and the task force and collecting some of the input that we were receiving too. And we thought that to kind of accommodate the ease of transition and the change that the project will have for users in the state forest as a result of this work, we thought adding some of that buffer would be helpful, but it also will serve, more importantly, as a great educational moment for everyone to see the difference between the non-native conifer plantations over the restoration of the native bear and oak woodland communities that will be happening as a result of this work. So again, we're only doing about 50% of the overall 175 acres, and this will be a great tool to help educate everyone on the island and certainly the task force and DCR about the changes of how this project will have. And it will be a little bit, additional work in the long run because we'll have to come back, but it certainly provides a great educational moment.
Thank you so much. That's great.
All right, I would like to give other
I'm
people
done.
a chance.
I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Are there other questions? John, go right ahead.
I have some practical questions for you. What machinery do you anticipate having on site for doing this cutting?
Sure, it most likely would be a feller buncher cutting and felling the trees and a grapple skidder bringing those trees to a landing.
And do you plan on leaving the stumps or tipping them?
No, stumps will be just cut as flush as they can, but there won't be any stump removal.
Will there be any fire suppression equipment on site?
I would say only if the fire chief or fire control thinks it's necessary. Otherwise, no.
And if I saw this correctly, you thought there'd be 2,613 tons of chips. I think that was on the cutting.
Correct.
That's like 65 truckloads if you can get 40 tons on each truck. Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right.
A lot of trucks. That's more than we got. It's like the morning at the steamship.
I think he said grapple skidder is what you were asking about.
Skidder.
Karen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious if, does Heritage know about the acreage change, or is the submittal is gonna sort of inform them about the acreage change? Because I was just surprised because I thought there was a requirement for the mitigation to do a certain amount of acreage.
They do not know about the change due to the trail buffer, and we really just wanted to go a little bit. Well, we didn't want to take too much of a bite off, and we wanted to see how it goes first with this level of acreage.
Okay.
And if I read the mitigation requirement right, I think the 175 acres, there's 2035 is kind of the far end, of that timeline when it needs to take place. Oh, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, can you hear me? I just want to say we've been working in close consultation with the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife on this project. So they certainly are our partner in working towards the end goal. So we have been working with them.
Kate and then Michael.
I have three questions. The first one concerns the time frame of the permitted cutting, the December, April time. Second concerns the budget, and the third is also about machinery. So my first question is, if there aren't any rare species of these rare species in the white pines, why does the time frame even matter when they're cut? Why can't they be
That's a
cut
good-
now if there aren't no species in them?
Well, I mean, you will have to pass at least, that could be a determination from natural heritage. But typically you would have to pass a small section of the side of the road where there are a small amount of habitat for the rare moth and butterflies. Plus, there's also rare plants in the fire lanes, on the sides of the fire lanes as well, which I can't speak for them, but may also determine when operations can take place.
Okay, my second question is, what is the budget for this whole project from beginning to end? In other words, is there any end foreseen? Is it going to be an annual budget, or is it what's the whole budget for this thing? When is it going to cost, all on an ongoing basis?
So our ultimate goal is to comply with the endangered species requirements of the 175 acres. This first phase, we do have money in our budget to handle this first phase.
How much is that?
We're estimating around 50,000.
$60,000 for the whole thing?
For this first phase.
But the rest of it, though, what's the budget for this whole thing? I mean, what are we looking at as taxpayers in terms of what are we funding? How much money of our tax money is going to this project on an ongoing basis?
It will certainly depend on each phase and how much the bids come out at. So we don't have a full cost analysis of all 175 acres, and it's going to take us a few years to do that.
Like the bids for the wood, or the bids for the work, or bids for what?
The bids for the work.
How many companies are there that you send these requests for bids out to?
We haven't gotten to that point yet. We have to get the cutting plan approved.
Right. So Kate,
okay.
Once the cutting plan is approved, then DCR will put together bid documents that goes on the central registrar for companies to put bids on. And then depending on the criteria, DCR will award the bid. And the first phase will be a great determination of understanding the markets and what numbers are coming in at. And we can use that to better identify total cost for future phases of the full 175 acres.
I don't think Connor.
Is that going to be for the 175 acres? How many years is foreseen to do all that? And then to maintain it.
So I guess we could start with the cutting plan is good for 2 years, and then we would have to renew. And our first intent is to focus on this first phase, get through that, and understand total project cost, markets change, and then work with the task force on future phases.
So in other words, it could be going on forever.
No, and by 2035, that needs to be complete. But to address one of your earlier questions, because that's what the mitigation permit says, to address one of your earlier questions about ongoing maintenance, I don't think Connor's here yet. He's as the state forest superintendent, but he said that they have the equipment. They recently got a new piece of equipment that can handle a lot of the ongoing maintenance of those tracks, in addition to some of the prescribed burns that'll take place, periodically on I'm not sure what the cycle will be, but I think the first one there will help inform subsequent, the frequency.
Okay, and my third question just was also about the machinery. Is that machinery already on the island, or is it going to be brought to the island? And how is it going to be brought to the island?
It's not
Well-
currently on the island, and it'll be brought over on the using the freight ferry.
On the SSA, right?
Michael,
All right, thanks, Dan. Hi, guys. I'm not sure why I'm bothering to say this, but I'll be able to sleep better at night. I guess if I can accomplish that, that'll be a good thing. So I just have a question. Has it been publicly announced the extent of the total project? Because I know we're talking 175 acres, but believe there's an additional 600 acres, which would take out most of the pines in the Correllus forest. Has that been publicly announced? The
That
full
isn't-
extent of the plan?
Yeah, that isn't in our current planning. It's the 175 acres. I'm not exactly sure where that 600 acres came from. It is
All
the
right, well, that's
175
out
acres.
there. So I want to, all right. So when you say it's not in your current planning, you're not ruling it out.
I'm saying that it's not in our current planning. I mean, I'm not sure what happens 20 years from now or 30 years from now, but it's not in our current planning.
Because I think that's an important point. I guess, I'm sorry.
It's right here, the map that was in the MISA. It's on the end in the appendix. It's 715
That's how many-
acres.
That's the number.
It's
That's
right
the
here.
that's the amount of
It's
that's the amount of plantations we have in the state forest.
no, they talk about the management plan for each one of these marked areas. I mean,
Unless I missed something.
they're all marked. I mean, I'd love to share this with you. They're all marked out.
is that when it was the Department of Environmental Management?
I don't know. I found it in that.
So I don't know the date of that document. With the help of David Foster, we mapped, we mapped all of the conifer plantations in the state forest. I think it totals somewhere over 800 acres or so.
Right.
Roughly that,
You
yeah.
can see it has the management strategies right here.
Yeah, no, but I think it would be useful to know, like, that's what snapshot in time this was generated.
I found it on the MISA plan at the end in the appendix.
Right. So, and we've been trying to remind at every turn by the end of next year, as part of that mitigation requirement, a comprehensive forest management plan for all of Correllus, needs to take place, needs to happen, needs to be developed.
So that.
And there's a community engagement component to that. DCR can speak more to that, but I just think in this context, that's really important to remember, because it's a chance to look at the broader, well beyond these 175 acres. I think that's going to be a good,
Dan, I mean, I guess that's my point, is that for those of us, there's no secret that, I don't want to see any endangered species go extinct. I feel for that. But if I were your boss and I said, I'm going to give you $1 million and your job depends on accomplishing 3 things. One is to reduce the fire risk. Number 2 is to create additional space for these endangered species. But number 3 would be appreciate that there are folks on the island that actually enjoy the recreation portion, which includes white pines. And if you were told that you had to accomplish all 3 of those things, you'd be able to get it done. And I guess that's for those of us on the island that are pushing back against this plan. When we say community engagement to be able to come up with a compromise solution, it would be to have some respect for the fact that there are people here that find those white pines of value. And we'll never know we'll never know what kind of compromise could come of it because we'll never have that chance to sit and talk with you about it. And I think any future pushback by islanders who, once they start seeing the cutting, as they did when the hospital cut a significant portion of land on one of our major roads, many people became upset about that. And I think, again, that'll happen when they start seeing the clear cutting here. And I think if we all had an agreed upon plan that respected that there's a position amongst all of us, that you could see that as having some value within the context of your planning process, you'd achieve so much more in terms of acceptance. And I guess my last point is that I talked to Dan and I suggested to him way before you submitted the cutting plan that those of us that enjoy the pines, where you're cutting is ground zero. That is, for many people on this island, the pine forest, without considering the other 600 acres. That's the place where the recreation occurs. That's where the parking area is. That's where the pullouts are. If you were to survey islanders and you said, what is your interpretation of the pine forest? They tell you it's the red trail, the pine trail, and logjam. And so what I had asked for, Dan, is if you're trying to figure this out, you want to test the logistics about processing the lumber and do all those sorts of things, could you have a compromise with us and say, let's use sections 8, I think it was 8, 10, and I've got it written down here. There was a section of forest that was closer to the airport that was contiguous, would allow you to develop a contiguous strip of land that would be, I would think, very beneficial in terms of repopulating with these species. And we were just asking for some sort of compromise. And I was told that the reason you're focusing over there is because it's closer to the houses. But if you're looking at the whole project as a large plan with a future looking, perspective, I guess I just wanted to make it clear that people here are not unsympathetic to what you're trying to do. I think you guys are well-meaning. I probably would help participate with you, but you need, I guess I just want to make that last point that if you could engage and at least consider that there could be some validity in a small way to our perspective so that we could get something out of that instead of having everything clear cut, you'd get a whole lot more cooperation and participation. That's all I have to say.
What I can say is when we do our management planning, there will be public interaction, public engagement. That will definitely happen.
Too late.
But can I just ask, do you consider, I haven't been a part of this the entire time, but I have this feeling that the white pine particularly is considered almost like poison ivy on someone's property. And that you would want to eradicate poison ivy because it doesn't belong there, it's not healthy. I would just, at some point, you don't have to answer it now, but because they were planted by man, I have this feeling that the fact that they're white pines is really driving the show here. And I guess I would ask, does anybody think a white pine tree is okay? It feels that way. And I think if you don't value that, some people do value them, then it's a very one-sided argument. And you guys hold all the cards. You're being mandated by Heritage to do this. I don't envy you on that, but you hold all the cards. You don't have to listen to anybody here on the island. But I would hope that you would, just for that, buy-in and participation.
What I will say, I'll say is white pine is a very important species here in Massachusetts. We have the tallest white pines in the Northeast, and we're proud of that. I will say that white pine is a very opportunistic species, and it is opportunistic to the point where it outcompetes native plants, and that's what's happening on the island.
Jeremy and then Ben.
You said it better than I could probably, but I just want to know, this ground has been covered before. No one at DCR, no one at Heritage, no one on the task force believes that white pines are bad, or that this work is not motivated by a distaste for white pines. It's ecological restoration. They can't be in the same place. The native habitat that we want to see there can't coexist with the white pine plantations. We can't remove half of the white pines and have sort of a matrix. It's like the native habitat, except it's got half white pine in it. That doesn't exist. That's not a naturally occurring habitat type in this location. And it's not a half measure toward ecological restoration. Whereas clearing parts of these plantation areas and letting them restore to the natural habitat, that is a half measure. That is a compromise. So I do absolutely respect the perspective of the folks who would like to see the pine plantations remain for all the benefit that they provide recreationally, aesthetically. I do respect that viewpoint, but I can't accept the idea that there's been no compromise here. When there's over 600 acres of plantations that are taking away from native habitat, and currently on the table is a plan to clear 52 acres of that, with a goal towards eventually taking out 175. We don't even have funding for that. Who's to say if that will even happen? But the current plan is 52 acres with a hope towards doing 175 acres out of over 600 acres. That is a compromise. Just inherently not compromising would be Heritage mandating that all the plantations be removed, telling DCR they have to do it not by 2035, but I don't know, sooner, and just go do it. That would be not compromising. That would be coming in an authoritarian fashion with no community input, saying, we don't care if the Martha's Vineyard Commission wants to convene a task force to discuss this. Doesn't matter. We're just going to do it. That would be not compromising. So I'm sorry. That got a little ranty, but the lack of compromise is bothering.
I walked in here with the assumption that there's another 600 acres on the table. And so I think it's important for the record here that has been debunked. Because so if you're saying out of 600 acres, this is a compromise, I don't argue with you, but I believe there's a long-term plan to get rid of the pines because you just said they can't coexist.
The real way to explain this distinction is on a governmental level, and I can't really speak to that. Maybe AJ can, the distinction between these different types of plans. But I think in a just common language way of looking at it, is the way I look at it, is that the plan you're describing with all these areas mapped out is essentially presenting a menu of options for where this 175 acres of mitigation could be taken from. These are appropriate places. These are places where you could do the restoration. That's my understanding of it. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ben, you've been patient. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of comments on the conversation just now. NHESP does not predate those plantations. They would never come in and tell anybody to remove those plantations. That's just not something NHESP will do. They have ordered DCR to fix the cutting that occurred more recently for the fire lanes and the trails. So I think that's sort of a red herring to say authoritarian is NHESP doing something that they would never do. So you can't say that's a compromise from a position that they would never take or haven't taken.
They could require the 175 to be done.
They are requiring the 175.
But sooner.
Right? But not the 670 that you said would be the compromise position. So I just.
No, that's not what you said.
All right, hold on. Let's let Ben finish. Go ahead.
But he made the concept of there's a compromise from an authoritarian position of NHESP saying we're going to clear all the plantations out, which is something that they wouldn't do, couldn't do.
They actually couldn't do that. That's true.
Right.
That's true.
That was my
point taken. Point taken. That was.
Couple questions and then, a few questions. First one, does DCR need to file for future phases? Yes or no? File cutting plans.
Yes. So
okay.
We will have to.
Yeah, no, that's all so beyond the 52.
Finish
Well, it was just a quick question. I don't want to take up a huge amount of time here. When does DCR file the maintenance plan that establishes restoration?
You mean
Can you ask that again? I didn't hear it.
When does DCR file a maintenance plan that will establish the restoration work? clear cutting is not the restoration, right? Unless we think it's just going to restore itself, which I don't think it will. So there's a certain amount of work that DCR will take on through a maintenance plan. When does that get filed? Because it seems like that happens after the cutting plan. Is that right? Peter, you mentioned a maintenance plan.
It's the management, I think it's the management plan.
Yeah, not a maintenance plan, but what our future
Management
planning
plan.
efforts, what will take
For
place
the
there.
areas, the 52 acres, right? What activities will happen within those 52 acres after it's been clear cut? When does that plan get filed?
At this point, it'll be to be determined. One of the things that we do in all of our management activities is we do post-management monitoring. See what comes up, whether it's native vegetation or not. But we do in all of our management strategies have this post-management monitoring. So that will be taking place.
Okay. All right. And so that leads me to the next question is, what do you hope to see to base future cutting decisions on?
What we hope to see is what is in the native landscape now. So what,
how long does it take? How long does a scrub oak woodland setting take to establish where you have huckleberry or berry or slurry? What's described in that plan is the goal. How long does that actually take to develop?
I'm going to say there's a level of it depends, but we also have had some cutting take place there. Paul has been good in some of his previous presentations on looking at some of those post-harvest photos. And in some places, it's come back really well within the last 10 plus years. And Paul, you could probably speak to that a little bit.
Let him finish, please.
I'm
having a hard time hearing the response.
In the 40-acre stand, there's plenty of, for the most part, there is existing low bush blueberry, black huckleberry, small sections of scrub oak that once the overstory of white pine is removed will bounce back almost immediately. We've seen it on the mainland and other areas. So that one should be pretty straightforward in our expectations. And the 4 3-acre ones is why we're doing a small scale experiment to see what does happen. There are all those species surrounding the area. Most likely there's seeds within those areas. But we'll see what happens once the cutting is done in those small patch cuts.
Because of the monoculture nature of the white pines in those areas, you are less certain what will grow back. Is that the idea?
Well, if any, you're talking about white pine growing back?
Whatever will grow back. You know, I mean, I think what you said for the other ones, well, there's already sort of a mix of natural habitat within the white pines that are being removed so that there's a base to start with. But where there's dense in those 3-acre plots, which is really just dense young white pine saplings, once you clear those out, there's very little left. So you're less certain what will actually grow back in that condition.
I agree with that statement, yes. That's why they're small.
And then, right.
One more, Ben, we got another hand.
Yeah, I have the one, I think it was 1 million board feet. Is that what you guys put in the cutting plan for 1,000 board feet, 201,000?
No, it was 201,000 board feet and.
Okay, 201,000. Yeah, I just didn't catch it quick enough. What has been done to analyze how many board feet the vineyard milling operations that currently exist can absorb of that 201,000? Is there a sense yet by anyone how much can actually be milled of that on the island? in
That
your
is to be
conversation.
determined. That's why we're having conversations with the local mill owners later this month.
You get a lot of specific questions like similar to that. You know, what can you handle at what?
And at what rate?
At what DBH, you know, and at any single snapshot in time. And I've heard back from some people, not all. So, you know, I'm hoping we get them on the same site and phone calls, we can get more of those specifics. But I also think part of it's gonna have to do it, and then I promise I'll stop and I'll listen. Part of it's gonna have to do with when the actual work happens, right?
Okay, that's what my next question is. If there's a rate of milling that the island can sustain, that's less than the 201,000 board feet over a December to April time period, because you really, you know, maybe you can mill into basically June, July, and then whatever's been cut in April is not millable because it's going to be invaded by fungus and staining, and it's just not going to be a valuable product anymore. Is there a chance that the cutting plan can be, or the bid documents can be written so that the rate of cutting matches the island's ability to harvest the timber? Is there an option there? If we find out the island milling community can absorb 30,000 board feet in a 1-year period, is there an opportunity to amend the cutting plan timeframe so that we can better align it? It might not ever be perfect, but better align it with the island's ability to absorb material. And that goes with the chips too. You know, that's a lot of chips as well.
And Megan, after the response, you're up.
I mean, the forest cutting plan doesn't dictate how much is removed at once. It just dictates what you plan to do over that 2-year period. And there's always extensions that can be asked for up to additional 2 more years. But overall, it would depend on DCR's financial budget, because obviously doing it all at once would be the least cost. And if we had to, do it in a slower pace, then obviously it would cost more. So that's up to budgetary concerns.
Okay.
All right, and Ben has one postscript. Go
Another
ahead.
question on the budgetary concerns. If there was a way to ramp up the milling capacity of the island by a subsidy from DCR to the mills, let's say equipment or manpower or a way to better utilize that material, is that something that the DCR budget would entertain?
In there to that.
There's a lot of hypotheticals here that I think one of the big things that we need to look at and what's going to happen over the course of the next couple months is to look at capacity. So that's certainly one of the things that we're going to be looking at, the capacity for on-site milling or local milling, and then it'll give us a better idea of what can stay on island and what can't.
I know we're gonna start losing people because it's past the hour. But I see Megan another hand, and then try to wind it down, John.
Okay, I'll just thank you. So quickly, I just want to say that I do appreciate these buffers that you're offering. I hope Heritage is cool with that, because I do see as compromise, but I do really hear Michael's point. And I found a video for one of the other towns that had a forest management plan introduced to the community around the time ours should have been, but because Edgartown didn't notify the rest of the island, there was never a public hearing or whatever DCR would call that. Would DCR call that a public hearing when you introduce whatever the pre-plan was before this plan that we're talking about today, the forest management plan? Is that considered a public hearing? Peter?
I guess I'm a little confused on, what public meeting was it?
You know, there are like a couple of towns that are kind of bunched together for when the Correllus plan came out. And I caught a YouTube video, and you were one of the stars, and it was a small town somewhere. And it was really interesting because this is the other point I wanted to make. Whoever was speaking on behalf of DCR, eventually, you presented the meeting, and I will let you know, Peter, what the town was. I've got to look back. And what was so interesting to me was the talk seemed to be about taking a pine plantation and managing it so that it could coexist with what I call rare species habitat, more biodiverse habitat. And that's always been something I've wondered, could that be part of the conversation here, which would fit in with some of the concerns that Michael expressed and others have expressed. But I don't really want to go off there. I just want to really say thank you for listening to us and creating space so that when people are recreating in parts of where the cutting is anticipated, they still will have that experience, because you're going to leave, I imagine, pines and other species up. But I also wanted to point out part of what Jeremy was saying is that why I'm also comfortable with what I'm hearing today, not 100%, but I am, is that this is about a study. Like, you are looking at these patch cuts. You've reduced the amount of, call it clear cut, of plantation pine to see what happens. So I'm not, I just want to put that out there. The last thing I wanted to say is Kate brought up budget stuff, so did Ben. What I find myself kind of throwing out there as the bumper sticker is, why are we replacing a healthy pine forest in many ways with perpetually managed habitat, monitored, managed, and funded? And part of the funding here shouldn't come from the taxpayers, should come from Sheriff's Meadow and DCR, because we wouldn't have this particular conservation management permit from Heritage if it wasn't about mitigation for violations that these two organizations are responsible for by violating the Endangered Species Act of Massachusetts. So I think for myself, I would like to hear at some point, how the funding isn't going to come from the vineyard. That's it. Thanks.
Megan, to your first part of your comments, yeah, thank you. We one of the things that we try to do with all of our management planning activities is to have public meetings. We try to reach the audiences that are interested. It's sometimes hard to do that. Within the last about 6 or 7 years, we've sent notices out to select boards to try to invite ourselves to local select board meetings to try to talk to the local folks that that would be very interested in projects. So that's what we try to do. It is part of our public process. Sometimes we don't succeed in getting all the right people to the table. It is a challenge in this state. To your other point, I can't speak to, we're required to do this based on both our fire breaks that we did in 2000, 2001, and the unauthorized cutting of trails more recently, something that we're required to do, and we're going to use some of our capital money to pay for that.
Peter, you and your team have really made a good faith effort to respond to a whole host of concerns, sometimes the same concerns more than once. I've been accused of having, the patience of a hungry toddler. I think you guys have really gone well beyond that as far as patience goes. So I appreciate that. And just I'll add one thing to Megan's question, something that has been covered about the management of this landscape that, while we're focusing on kind of elevating certain species. And I think it's been, because I don't think that Natural Heritage is here. They've attempted to explain they have a whole host of biodiversity goals, some of which are supported by the underlying conditions found here in southeastern Massachusetts that help achieve those in far smaller acreage than the managed forests, than the forests that are just left to kind of evolve naturally. But I am going to try to wind it down. John, if you still had a question, otherwise I'll go to Kate.
Couple simple ones. The cutting plan went by awfully quickly. Is there a place where I can get a copy of it? Second, the amount of board feet you guys are talking about and milling here on the island. If the mills here on the island don't have an edger or a planer, which I mentioned to Dan a while ago, you're going to be stuck with nothing but rough cut lumber. If they have an edger or a planer, now you need a large volume of space to stack and dry that stuff. I'm sure you guys know all that as it is. That volume of board feet would build about 5 3,000 square foot houses. So if you want to visualize that, that's what we're talking about.
I think that volume also included some of the timber that's not going to be of
just reading off the
value.
list.
No, I'm just saying for context. I don't think even if they could,
And they have two categories, board feet.
completely right. So that which we can absorb, I don't think even if we had all the right equipment, we're going to necessarily use all of that. Caitlin.
Just a couple of quick questions. The buffer, is that you're always going to leave the buffer, or are you coming back later and taking that down? That's one question. Two, is it $50,000 you've got as a total budget? So I'm curious about that because the last time we were talking, it was like 3,000 to 10,000 per acre. So that doesn't add up. I think that's like, if there's 52 acres, it's $987 an acre. So if that's true, and you don't have enough money to do this, is there any way that you could do the patch cuts first and let the place that everybody loves, the lower corner, stay? And then the last thing, I think that I heard a long time ago that the April to November, no cut was because of a bat, because of the bats. There's a rare bat out there and he might use the trees for nesting or perching or whatever. So I don't know if that's true, or could you comment on that? Thank you.
There are a host of things that are potential priority habitat. Not exactly sure what the one thing is that precludes us from cutting from April to November, but there are quite a few things that it could be. The 50,000, yes, that's not going to get us all the way to where we need to be. That was an estimate for that first, essentially the first phase, and we do have more money if necessary.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you all. Oh, sorry, you had
The
yes,
last question was
sorry.
about the buffer. Are you going to take the buffer down afterwards or just leave it?
I
mean, is it going to stay there
I'll
for like
leave that
10
to Paul.
years?
Paul.
That will all depend on the response of the community on how they feel how they feel the project is going.
All right. I will see, Paul, I will see you on the 23rd. Thank you everyone for attending and staying late today. Appreciate the time that's went into the plan and, into, the pivots that have gone into, trying to maintain that recreational component of that quadrant. It's not lost on us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.